Shwmae a chroeso i Sgwrs, podlediad Consortiwm Canolbarth y De. Yn y podlediad hwn byddwch chi'n clywed y trafodaethau diweddara am bob math o bethau addysg. Hello and welcome to Sgwrs, the Central South Consortium podcast. In this podcast we'll bring you the very latest discussions on all things education.
Hello and welcome to the Central South Consortium podcast. In 2021, in collaboration with schools and universities in the region, we created a publication called 10 Ways to Support Initial Teacher Education in Schools. This is the fourth episode in a series of 10, each exploring one of the 10 ways that schools can offer the right kind of environment where both student teachers and school can flourish. The title of this podcast is Refine, Coaching and Mentoring. My name is Sian Watkins and I am delighted to welcome back our double act from episode 2, Laura Morris and Vicky Evans, who are Deputy Head and Assistant Head at Ysgol Nantgwyn. Welcome back both. Lovely to see you again.
Hi.
And Laura, I know that you had some experience here in terms of facilitating coaching and mentoring training for Central South Consortium. So I know you're going to have lots to tell us. And Vicky, I know you've had lots of experience supporting that in school as well. So, okay, traditionally, when we talk about ITE support, we normally just focus on mentoring. Normally any kind of conversation about ITE, we talk about mentoring. But the title of this podcast is Refine Coaching and Mentoring. So why coaching too?
Well, Sian, I think it's really important that we're able to support individual student teachers. And when we're supporting individual teachers, we recognise that one thing doesn't necessarily work for all people. And so we have different levels of proficiencies and different points at which our student teachers are on their progression towards the professional teaching standards. And at points, a mentoring position is right to have with that student teacher, but at other points and possibly with other student teachers, a coaching conversation will be more purposeful and will allow the student teacher to move to a greater level of autonomy. So I think it's really important that ITE mentors have an awareness of both mentoring and coaching skills and techniques. And I think it's really important that they have the freedom really to make professional judgments about where they apply mentoring and where they apply coaching. And in some situations, it's a little bit of a mixture of both, but that is applied well to the individual in whatever conversations that they're having. I think it's really important that mentors continue to develop their mentoring skills throughout, but also that they extend their knowledge of coaching models and their experiences of coaching conversations. And I think by doing both of those things, they develop their awareness of where we're doing this and where we're doing that, if you like.
So just for a bit of clarification there for anybody who is listening and are fairly unfamiliar with those terms, mentoring and coaching, what's the difference between the two?
Well, I think you can summarise it in a number of ways. And actually, if you pull up a Google search on this, it does summarise it in a number of ways. But the way that I read it, there's a couple of important factors. One is the balance of the relationship. So in a mentoring relationship, it's a hierarchical relationship where the mentor is at a higher level in that relationship. Whereas with coaching, it's a more equal footing to that relationship. And I think what you see there in terms of the processes, that mentoring includes far more instances of the mentor guiding, directing, giving examples, drawing from experience for the mentee to learn from. Whereas in coaching, the shift is almost towards the student teacher starting to reflect and identify possible strategies in order to move forward and almost start to solve their own problems and identify their own approaches. And that's supported by a coach in that more non-hierarchical relationship.
So would you say then it makes sense sometimes for a more coaching approach to take place when students become a little bit more independent or a little bit more confident in certain aspects of their practice?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And, I think it's very common, having had, a number of coaching relationships, where we can start a coaching conversation that actually at a point in time moves back into mentoring and then moves back into coaching. I don't think we should be rigid about it. I think we need to be flexible. I think we need to meet the needs of the individual student teacher. But I think, we could make a generalisation that we are more likely to have a mentoring conversation at the start of student teacher practice, but as we progress through, we would hope to see that we can have more and more coaching conversations. But even as a teacher that's been in the profession for some years now, some of the conversations that I still have are mentoring, and some of them are coaching, and it's really important to recognise that they're both very valid ways of moving towards more positive outcomes.
But there's a tension though, isn't there, sometimes when you're a mentor of student teachers, because you have to assess them as well. So there's that you've talked a lot about guiding and supporting, but normally in a mentoring capacity there's not an assessment need at the end of it, but with ITE there is. Do you find that can be conflicting sometimes?
I think here at Ysgol Nantgwyn we're very clear on the role of a mentor within ITE, and as we alluded to in our previous podcast, we have very clear roles and responsibilities that are defined, and part of that responsibility as an ITE mentor is to have professional dialogues with student teachers. The mentors need to have a thorough understanding of the professional standards that the ITE students need to meet in order to make accurate evaluations of where the student teacher is at any given point in time. Progress needs to be discussed with student teachers, and we make sure that it is structured, that meetings are regular, that student teachers are also expected to be an active participant in that conversation in the process. Mentors need to be able to identify at a really early stage any student teachers who are not making the expected progress, so that we can act quickly and sensitively to their needs and make them excellent practitioners, because ultimately our mentors are evolving and developing the future of the profession. And I think when seeing it with that weight of responsibility, that actually I don't think there is a conflict, because it is a professional responsibility.
I think it's really important that we say here that the student teacher's progress is not the responsibility of the mentor alone.
No.
It's a shared responsibility across the school, but also across the partnership, and the challenges in terms of the tensions or the possible tensions that you talk about there, Sian, can be mitigated if the mentors work really effectively in partnership, both within the school but also across the full and wider partnership.
I would agree. It's really important with such important decisions. It's really important to work together, isn't it? And you referred to the earlier podcast where you talked about the importance of collaboration. And clearly collaboration is really important when it comes to determining how well students are achieving. So, yeah. Even so, there is a lot of responsibility there. So I just wonder, and Vicky, you talked about that mentors are developing and evolving the future of the profession. So the mentor role is a really important role. And I wonder, in your school, do your staff see mentoring as perhaps an important step in terms of career progression?
I would say yes, I agree with that here actually. When I think of staff who have become mentors in recent years and actually then look at their trajectory of their own careers, most have seen that not as a stepping stone to something else, but a part of their pathway and their journey. I think the training that our partners offer, various universities, as well as the training we offer within Ysgol Nantgwyn, I think actually the skills are very transferable to go on to be middle leaders, senior leaders, working, with external partners such as Central South Consortium. So I think actually mentoring for a lot of our staff initially perhaps it was something they thought they wanted to might be interested in, and actually what it's allowed them to do is develop in their own career path beyond simply ITE training, that actually you can take it into other areas of education.
Great. So coaching and mentoring not only supports student teachers, it supports the mentors too.
Absolutely, yeah.
Great. So do you have any top tips where coaching and mentoring is concerned that's worth sharing with our listeners?
I think for myself, I would say a top tip when you initially become a mentor is to actively practice coaching and mentoring techniques, models, because initially having some of the conversations that are not scripted, but I suppose within a framework, if you're looking at coaching models, it's just possibly something that is unusual or you're not used to. So I would say practicing, actually taking some time with other mentors, with colleagues that you feel comfortable with, and actually going through some scenarios, because they're really then beneficial when working with ITE students. And what I have found from personal experience is through active practice, that the conversations that you then have with ITE students are strengthened and much more precise, and the actions and the outcomes are I suppose, of a better quality than without practice. So that would be my top tip.
Do you have any coaching models that you could recommend so any listeners can search for them? And
lots of our staff use the GROW model.
Yeah.
A number of them use the Oscar model. Personally, I'm a fan of the push and pull model there as well. And if we're talking about having a look at things and looking at different references, I would certainly encourage people to have a look at Nancy Klein's thinking space. I think that for me, in terms of my coaching practice, was something that really, really helped me get beyond those moments where perhaps there isn't any talking. And of course, those are as valuable as the talking moments in a coaching conversation, because they allow that time to just think and get beyond what's immediately at the front of your brain.
Okay, thanks. That's really helpful. And I think we've put a couple of links to some coaching models as well in the handbook too. So, and if anybody accesses that, there will be some direct links there. So that's really helpful. So Laura, any final top tips from you?
I would add to what Vicky has said there. You know, mentoring student teachers is an incredibly important role. It's a really valuable role, but it's also a really big role. And I think it's really important for mentors to understand the level of the commitment and also the skills that they will need to develop to be successful as a mentor. And we always encourage people who would like to become a mentor to shadow and to work alongside more experienced mentors before they step into the role, but also during the role. And our mentors here have a lovely community spirit where they draw on each other on quite a regular basis in order to discuss different situations, different scenarios, to discuss what, you know, parts of the professional teaching standards look like and what they don't look like. And I think really working alongside and collaborating with other people is really, really important in making sure that our mentors are successful.
So that brings us full circle back to collaboration again. So, and I have to say, I've really enjoyed collaborating with both of you as well. But again, we reached the end of our time here on this podcast. And thank you again, both of you. I've really enjoyed this podcast very much. Listeners, please remember that this is one in a series of 10. Please look out for our other episodes, and if you want to read more or if you want to pick up any of those coaching models, you can access them via the publication 10 Ways to Support Initial Teacher Education in Schools, and that's available on the Central South Consortium website.
Diolch am wrando ar y bennod hon o Sgwrs. Cofiwch ein dilyn ar Twitter a Facebook, tanysgrifio ein sianel YouTube, ymuno yn cymunedau ar ein gwefan a darllen ein bwletin ysgolion wythnosol am y newyddion diweddaraf. Thanks for listening to this episode of Sgwrs. Don't forget to follow us on Twitter and Facebook, subscribe to our YouTube channel, join our online communities via our website, and read our weekly school bulletin for the latest news. Hwyl am y tro. Bye for now.